This is the master matrix on sequencing. What I have shown on the wall is DOK1, the sequence picture cards for common activities like tie shoes, get ready to go outside, get ready for school, wrap a gift, or go down the slide. Here's the example. Other activities I did for DOK1, they used sequencing cards that had how to do certain things, and they had to do that individually. And then they had to use sequence words to go with the pictures. For DOK2 that's on the wall, they had to arrange sentences into a meaningful paragraph. How to write a friendly letter and how to walk a dog. And they had to use their transition words for that as well. The other DOK2 activities orally tell the order of the daily schedule, and then after hearing a story that was read, they had to retell the story using the sequencing words. For DOK3, they had to choose a leveled reader and create a sequence square. And here's the example. Each of the kids had a different story that they chose on their reading level. And then the other two DOK3 activities, they had to do a story graph, and then the other one was they had to do a transition word sequence chart.
Whatever you do,
This is Building Connections with Mastery Matrix with my sequencing. Third and fourth grade Title I math, but however we did it with the whole fourth grade. Here's the Mastery Matrix that we worked on. We concentrated on the left side of the Mastery Matrix. The very first one that we did was we generalized, we identified and introduced the steps to traditional method, lattice method, and partial products method for multiplying. What we did was we introduced the kids to each step. We explained the step, basically did a brief introduction, and then we had them identify each steps to make sure that they understood, and this is kind of one way that we checked for understanding that the kids were understanding what we were talking about. The next step that we did, we worked on interconnecting the pieces between what we had already learned and, of course, the skill that we're trying to master, which is sequencing. We went to an LOC2 or a DOK2, which was they were to interpret and make connections, and then they were to generate the components and justify logical progression. So we took the steps to traditional method, lattice method, and partial products, and then put them to practice. They worked with peer instruction and review, and they had to explain the steps to other students, and they had to check their work as they went along. Just for example, a couple of things that we did. We broke the traditional method, the partial product, and the lattice method down into separate cards. We passed out one card at a time. They had to pick a partner. They had to explain how they were going to do each thing, and then they had to pick another partner to check their work and to make sure that they were on the correct steps and understanding what they did. So they did this actually on paper product. I guess they actually wrote it down. They actually talked through it. And then we took some kids aside and we had them explain to us their words or their version of how they understood and how they would explain, of course, the traditional method, the lattice method, and the partial product. The last one we did was the DOK3, and where each student had to critique a series to formulate a hypothesis and justify whether what we were doing would work. The students discussed the reliability of if they took traditional method, lattice method, and partial product and no matter what they did, and if it was the same problem, would they get the same answer no matter what they did? Of course, there was kind of their work. They had to use the same problem for each box, and they had to kind of do their own investigation of whether or not did each method work, no matter what method would we use, or if we traded methods, would we get a different answer? And of course, as you can see, through investigation and through their critical thinking skills, they've came to the conclusion that yes, it will work no matter what.
This right here is the sequencing activity of it. It's the level 3, 1.3, and it is for a graphic organizer for 2 or 3 first grade students who are doing it if you give a mouse a cookie, as well as if you take a mouse to school, and if you give a moose a muffin. This is kind of like the top 1.3, and the students needed a lot of they could retell it, but needed a little bit of assistance to it to do it. I also had my first grade students as the 3.3 level, the LOC level. I had the kids tell me, and I wrote what they thought would be the next thing that would happen in the books that we were reading. And if you give a moose a muffin, and if you take a mouse to school. For both of them, they thought that they would either just ask for the muffin, for the moose book, and also to be taken back to school if you take for the mouse to school. With these two activities, this one and with this one goes from top to bottom and then back up to the top. The students had to say, after giving the first activity, after the first thing in the story, they had to say what was going to happen next and next, etc. till the end. There was a little bit of difficulty, but overall they were able to tell me, for the most part, what was going to happen next. If you take a mouse to school, the students had a greater success with being able to tell what came first, second, third, etc. till the end.
You're awesome. All right. Bye.
This is Mallory James's Title I Mastery Matrix for sequencing. The first thing I started with for DOK1 is first off, I explained what sequencing was and gave students examples of sequencing. We read a story called Grandfather's Journey, and then I gave them parts of the story, and using the transitional words, they had to put the story in order. It was teacher-led, it was guided, so we did it together so they have an idea of what sequencing is. So DOK2, we used this, was the next day, and we used the same story, Grandfather's Journey. And the students picked 4 parts of the story that was the most meaningful to them, and they had to write sentences explaining which parts of the stories, and then they had to put the parts in the story in order. So each student chose, and I made sure that these were important parts and guided them through writing and their spelling, but then they picked the parts, they put them in order by themselves. And then my DOK3 is more independent. The next day I read them a story, and they had to do a sequencing graphic organizer on their own. And that is it.